Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's been a long
Yes,
time coming.
I know we
Yeah,
connected on Instagram, and I know we have a lot of commonalities. And I've loved your content, and I'm so excited to have this conversation today. Can you first start off by telling me a little bit about yourself, your family, and your family's travel experience?
sure. Yeah. So I am a mom of three. My oldest is 10, my middle is 7, almost 8, and my youngest is 3. And we live in the Midwest. We live in Michigan. So we're not close to either Disney Park in the US, but um, we are also a homeschooling family, which has been a good fit for us as we travel and explore new places. And I also have my blog that I started called Moms Make It Magical, and that's the same username that I use for Instagram and also for YouTube. And basically, that was kind of a platform that I wanted to start because I realized that there were extra challenges with traveling with a highly sensitive or a sensory sensitive child.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of my background, I would say. Um, I will also add that I have a background in social work and public health, which I feel like kind of helps inform the things that I share. I haven't worked
Totally.
professionally in a long time, but I feel like that still has an influence in what I share. Um, and travel for us, I mean, for me personally, has always been really important to me. I think even from like my high school days, I did a summer study abroad in Nice, France, which I really enjoyed. And I also did like alternative spring break in college to Honduras. And so I feel like all of those experiences were really important. And I wanted to kind of
Mhm.
impart that in my own family as I had my own
Yeah.
children. And I just think it's really important to kind of have like a global perspective and being able to leave your bubbles and to, you know, see that life can be done differently, which I know can be harder when you have a neurodivergent kid. But
Mhm.
yeah, just being able to see like, okay, like life can be like this and that's okay. Or, you know, this can happen and it's okay. And so I feel like there's so much growth that happens when you kind of leave things that you're familiar with for a little bit and see, you know, beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, when you travel with your kids, I mean, you're opening up this world.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're curious, their sense of wonder, it's an extension in learning, you know, and I think it's no matter their abilities, you know, it's just in the way that maybe we do things. Like maybe we move at a, you know, we go at a slower pace. We don't try to jam pack the trip, you know, with a
Right.
bunch of things. Like,
Right.
but there's something that I think that kids of all abilities can take away from travel and
Mhm.
also from parents. Like from my perspective, you see your kids in a different way, and
Mhm.
it's just like you're like, those are my kids, those are my babies, and you know,
Yeah.
it's such an awesome experience.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so how did you first discover your kids' sensory sensitivities? Like, are there any early signs, experiences that led you to realize that they may need some extra support?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I will say it's mostly my oldest.
Mhm.
And I think even from infancy, like we knew that she was a harder to soothe baby. We dealt with colic and like reflux, and, you know, she had a hard time sleeping. So I feel like early on, I kind of knew that things were going to be a little bit more challenging with her.
Yeah.
And then even just going into toddlerhood and as a preschooler, you know, we had a lot of bedtime battles. Like transitions were always really hard. You know, we would go to like a local children's museum, and sometimes, you know, they would have announcements over the PA system being, you know, telling school groups that it's like lunchtime or to go here and there. And she would just like freeze and then like
Mm.
freak out because it would just be this sudden noise out of nowhere that she didn't understand. And that would be it. Like we would have to leave the museum. And even things like fireworks, like Fourth of July was always
Yeah.
awful, awful. Like that was the worst night of the year for us. And we at the time like lived right near this area where our town would set off their massive fireworks display.
Mhm.
And it was a primetime location for other people, for our neighbors. Like they would gather all their families to come and watch from our neighborhood. But for us, it was really hard. So I feel like I picked up on little things here and there from very early on. I didn't really
Mhm.
know what it meant or like what we had to do exactly, but I kind of picked up that like some things were that she would react a little more sensitively to certain things compared to an average child. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also like you have to give yourself a little bit of credit. Like I did the same. Like with your first, you're like, I've never done this before.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I may not know someone that has a neurodivergent child,
Right.
like you're just figuring it out.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important just to also notice like your child is a little bit different than other kids and then to
Mhm.
kind of sense that a little bit and how you approach it. And I do want to just like give a disclaimer like we're talking about our neurodivergent kids and we're sharing our perspective. We know that this isn't a one size fits all, but we hope that in sharing this, like some of it will resonate with you all. So,
Mhm.
I just want to be sensitive to that because I'm definitely not like, a poster mom for like every,
Right.
low support needs autism,
Right. Yeah.
parent. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we connected on Instagram and
Mhm.
really over more Disney content
Yeah.
and like I had mentioned the commonalities of like talking about sensory sensitivities at Disneyland and Disney World and how we
Yeah.
approach kind of talking to our kids about rides and also a lot of like the sensory overviews at the two parks.
Right.
When it comes to traveling to Walt Disney World for you with your kids, how do
Mhm.
you approach the planning to ensure that everyone's comfortable? I mean, I see you have a lot of content. You guys probably go quite frequently. Maybe they're more used to it now, but
Yeah.
like how do you still approach it? You have a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So how does that
Yeah.
work?
So for us, I think, well, I feel like because we've had experience and we've made mistakes along the way, that definitely feeds into like how I navigate our planning process. But
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for us has been the flexibility, like being flexible. I know you've talked about that a lot on your Instagram. Um, yeah, like it's important to plan and to prepare ahead of time, but I think the biggest thing is to know that it's okay to let go of said plan. Like it's okay to kind of pivot if needed based on how your kids are
Yeah.
doing or how everyone else is doing. Like there is no prize that you get for like sticking to your itinerary. Um, and so I think that's the biggest thing. And I think you can only be flexible by having less on your list. You
Yes.
don't have space to be flexible if your to-do list is just jam-packed and you have every hour like scheduled out and you have all these things that you need to do. And it just makes for a very, very stressful trip. So I feel like
Yeah.
less is always more in my book. Um, that's why, for our first trip to Walt Disney World, that was in 2018, like the biggest mistake I made was booking way too many dining reservations.
Oh.
Like I thought that you had to do that in order to, have meals at Disney World. And so I had like a sit down dining reservation for almost every day of our
Oh.
trip. And it was just too much. And so I ended
Mhm.
up canceling a bunch of them. For us, like having a lot of time constraint commitments, like it doesn't really work very well for us.
Mhm.
So less is more for us for sure. And I know we've both spoken about like that midday break. Like
Oh my
that is
gosh.
so
Live and
important.
die.
Yeah. Like for us, we really like to go early. I mean, the kids are usually up early anyways, and so we'll take advantage of that and go early when it's not as hot and it's less crowded. And then during that between lunch and like 4 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock, we'll go back to the hotel. We don't have to nap, but we can rest, take it easy
Mhm.
for a little bit, and we'll go back to the park for that evening portion where it's
Yeah.
when it's less hot as well. So that has been like, that just makes it way more enjoyable for all of us.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I mean, we do it all the time because we try to stay when I go with my kids and I'm usually going alone with them, I try to stay on property. It makes me feel
right,
more comfortable.
right,
It's
yeah.
easier for the transitions for my son. He knows what
Hmm.
to expect. But my kids love the pool at the Disneyland Hotel. It is their
Hmm.
favorite. They love the
Hmm.
water slides. So I always try to like make sure that we kind of plan some time to just lounge around at the pool, and
Yeah,
that's usually, even if the kids just swim for like 30 to 45 minutes and then we
right.
go back to the room and, you know, kind of all rest, like
Yeah,
it makes it's really helpful from a regulating standpoint for my son.
right. Yeah,
And then even I need a break, you
yeah,
know? Like
yeah,
I sometimes I want to read or I just want to zone out and look at things on my phone and put my
right.
headphones in. And
Yeah,
um I just, again, the breaks are so important, but I
yeah,
also want to be sensitive to, we go quite frequently,
right.
us, and
Yeah,
I know that some families, this may be their biggest
right,
vacation, and it
right,
is, it can be costly. So
right.
I still think it's important, if your budget allows, if you can plan an extra day as a
Hmm.
buffer,
Right,
or bake in like to do a half a day at a park.
right.
Um, again, like no one wins a medal for
Yeah,
jamming your
exactly.
day, and then ending the day with one of your kids in tears.
Right, exactly. I know like people do think it's like a waste of time to,
Yeah.
why would we swim when we can swim at home, or why would we go to a playground when there's playgrounds at home? But like you said, from that self-regulation standpoint, like
Yeah.
just building in time for unstructured play, whether it's
Mhm.
at the pool or just where they don't have to be shuffled around. I feel like that having time for that is just so important to just be regulated,
Yeah,
and just be in a better place in terms of your nervous system.
totally. And
Yeah.
because we usually try to go back like around, like between 5 and 6, we'll order some food and then
Yeah.
we'll get some food and then try to camp out for fireworks, because at
Mhm.
Disneyland, there are a lot of people in a very small compact area trying to get fireworks, the perfect viewing spot. We
Mhm.
now watch fireworks away from the castle because there's just too many people. So we try to watch in front of Small World, where we have a little bit of extra space.
Mhm.
So again, it's just so helpful. We talked a little bit about, and as we talked about on Instagram, like sensory differences between Disneyland and Walt Disney World. Um, Maybe I think we should talk about that, because from my perspective, it is a completely different situation. I
Yeah.
think Walt Disney World being larger,
Mhm.
it can maybe help with like sensory sensitivities or feeling, there's more spaces, I think, to take a break there if you're
Yeah.
noticing that one of your kids needs a break or feeling overwhelmed.
Mhm.
Versus Disneyland, as I mentioned, we only have two parks. It is a little bit more compact.
Yeah.
It can be more of like, in my perspective, like a higher sensory experience, because
Mhm.
it's smaller. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people. It is kind of packed. Do you want to talk about like what it looks like at Walt Disney World, and maybe some of your favorite places to take a break, or
Yeah.
what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you said, because Walt Disney World is bigger, I feel like there are more options for those with different preferences. And
Hmm.
so if you're not that into rides, like there are so many other kinds of experiences that you can do. And there's even a whole cohort of people who do like resort only stays
Yeah.
at Walt Disney World. And I feel like that doesn't really happen at Disneyland because it's kind of, like nestled in Anaheim. And so people aren't going to like just stay at the Disneyland hotel to just stay there, is
No.
my understanding, right? So I feel like at Disney World, because it's so big and you're still in the Disney bubble, like you'll
Hmm.
find that a lot of people will even do resort only stays. And there's just so many beyond the pool, there's just so many activities that you can do. So like
Yeah.
I know Fort Wilderness, you can go horseback riding, you can do
Mhm.
archery. Most resorts will have like an opportunity to roast s'mores every evening. Um,
The
even
boardwalk.
yeah, the boardwalk, there's all that
Mhm.
entertainment there. We've rented like Surrey bikes around the boardwalk, and you get to
Yeah,
enjoy that. So there's just so much to do both like in and out of the park, where it's just less sensory overload, I feel like.
yeah.
So I feel like that helps at Walt Disney World. I will say, like, in terms of weather, I think Disneyland wins. um, yeah, the Florida humidity is just like another level, and I think that can also contribute to like the sensory
Yeah.
overload sometimes. And with the rain, like, you'll get the rainstorms that pass through. So if your kids like hate getting wet,
Mm.
or they don't like being in wet clothes, like that's a whole nother challenge. So I think Disneyland wins in like the weather department. I know it still gets pretty hot there sometimes, and I know
Yeah.
it went through like a cold snap recently, but yeah. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of like nooks and crannies to take a break. And there's a lot of options for hotels that are located close to the various parks and
Yeah.
things. But it can also be overwhelming because it is so big. And for a first timer, I feel like you might not know where to go or where
Mhm.
to, you know, what to do to take that break. So yeah, but I feel like every park there's spots. I feel like if there's a ride refurbishment or if there's something down, like those are always good spots to go to because no one's really there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of different options for sure. Yeah.
Well, I think that you touched on like an important part of Walt Disney World also is that I think the transitions can be hard also when you are staying at a property and then you need to get on a bus to go to the park and then
Mm-hmm.
you wait in line.
Right.
You know, I mean, it is like that at Disneyland also because if people are staying off property, they're walking, they're going through security, the bags are being checked, there's lines. So I think even baking in extra time for that
Mm-hmm.
and having like some pauses to help with the transitions are also
Mm-hmm.
really important.
For sure.
Um, I want to just share about the weather. So, the two times that I have been to Walt Disney World have been in August and in July.
Oh no.
Yeah, which are the worst times in my opinion to go because the
Yeah.
humidity,
Very
the
hot.
rainstorms,
Yeah.
and being from California, I haven't taken my kids to Walt Disney World yet, and it is a bit of a commitment. To Disneyland, we can either drive about 6 hours, which I
Uh-huh.
think is too long for me, or take a plane ride, which is just over an hour. But for us to fly to Walt Disney World, it's 5.5 hours. It's
Right.
a whole day of travel,
Right.
bookending.
Yeah.
And I think I know my son, obviously I can say I'm an expert in being his mother, but he hates being hot. The
Yeah.
rain, I think he would think it would be fun for a while, but we would really have to time it at the
Yeah.
time of year to be able to
Right.
go that the weather would be more mild because
Mhm.
even my daughter, she would be like, I can't handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be pretty miserable. We've done June once, and I was
Mhm.
like, never again. Even we've done like end of September, early October, and even then it's still pretty muggy, and that's like prime hurricane season too.
Yes.
So, I feel like especially at Disney World, the timing of when you go can really impact
Make or
like
break.
your whole experience. Like I personally love like January.
Mhm.
I mean, we live in Michigan, so like I know the Florida people are like, "Oh, it's cold when it's in the 60s," but we love like that's perfect for me. Like a light jacket on top, like I love that's the perfect time for
Yeah.
me to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure now if you went to Disney World, you're like, "Well, I can wear some shorts because in Michigan, you're all bundled up." Yeah.
Exactly.
So I followed along on Instagram on your recent international trip, and I am
Mhm.
dying to know because, as I mentioned to you, we are headed to Japan in the spring, and this is our first international trip and our first very long flight. So,
Mhm.
how did you prepare your kids? What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced? What did you maybe bring along on the plane to help with the sensory,
Yeah.
sensitivities, like all the things? I'm dying to know.
Yeah. So, yeah. So for context, we went to the Philippines. My mother-in-law and father-in-law lived there, and so we we've actually been many times before. And we went with my just two older kids when they were like 3.5 and like 9 months old, I think,
Oh
at the
my
time. And
gosh.
so I know we were, I don't know what we were thinking, but so it's been a long time. That was in 2017, and we hadn't gone in quite some time. So
Yeah.
now my older two are older, so I feel like that helped. But I think I prepared for it kind of in the same ways that I do for other travel.
Mhm.
We YouTubed a lot about the Philippines.
Yeah.
I do that for any destination, anywhere new that we go. We always look up YouTube videos of where we're going. We'll watch travel vlogs of other people. We'll look up, things that kids like to do in Manila, Philippines, and it really helps a lot to just kind of get used to the idea of us going somewhere new.
Yeah.
And my older two, they are like elementary age now, and they kind of know how to use a computer. One new thing that we tried this time was I let them go on Google Maps,
Mhm.
and we put in my in-laws address, and I let them kind of explore like on Street View. And that's something I like to do myself when I go
Yeah.
somewhere new. I want to know like what it looks like where I'm going. And they really enjoyed that. They spent a long time just kind of driving through the streets of Manila and seeing the different sites. And it really helped when we got there. But yeah, in terms of the actual travel piece, that was very hard for us. I'm
Yeah.
not going to lie. It was really hard. Um, so for us, it wasn't a direct flight. We flew from Detroit to South Korea, which was
Mm.
about like, I think it's about 14 hours. And then from Korea to Manila was another 4.5.
Mm.
So it was a tough time to travel. It's a
Yeah.
very long time. And so I think the biggest thing that helped me was kind of like letting go of any expectations around like screen time or
Oh,
sleeping. um, you know, like I think my youngest, my 3-year-old, was probably on his tablet for like 10 hours straight on our first flight. And so, like on a regular day at home, like I would never let that happen.
yeah.
But I just kind of, you just have to let it go because it is pure just survival. Like we just need to get there.
Mhm.
And even with sleep, I think sometimes for me, I like hope that they'll fall asleep during this time frame because then it'll help us be better adjusted when we arrive. And you know but I realized, that I can't force that. Like I can encourage them, be like, hey, maybe we'll turn off the movie for a little bit, and maybe we'll try shutting our eyes, but it's not something I can like force them to do. And so it's kind of letting go of that expectations of sleeping or screen time. It's just do what we need to do to
Yeah.
keep them happy and not disturb the other people on the plane. Although we did a little bit, but that's kind of
I mean, it goes with the
part of it.
territory of kids.
Exactly. So it was just kind of like letting go of that.
Mhm.
And I think another thing that we dealt with that was hard was the jet lag afterwards.
Yeah.
So even when we were when we arrived, I think that it was a lot of letting go again of being like, okay, you can have all the snacks at 3 a.m. because they're starving because they skipped dinner, all the things. It's very much like running on survival mode, I think.
Totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, it might be a little bit different for you because I know your children are a little bit older. And so maybe they'll be able to adjust a little bit quicker. But I think, especially for my toddler, it was
Mhm.
really hard for that long haul flight. And I would say, like, his age is actually probably not like the most ideal age to fly a long haul flight. I think if he was a
But
little bit younger, it would have been easier, or if he was a little
mhm.
bit older, it might have been also a little bit easier. But it is what it is, and we survived. That's all that matters. But there's definitely no like magic formula for doing those long haul flights. Yeah, we
Yeah.
had the tablet fully charged. We had comfortable headphones for the kids to be able
Mhm.
to watch their movies and their shows, because the ear for us, the earbuds are never like they don't like them at all.
No.
So we made sure we had our headphones, and we brought familiar snacks with us on the plane. And, they serve food on the plane too, but it was also nice to have things that I already knew that they liked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I think that you touched on like an important thing. It is about surviving. Like you're parenting in a different location, so you're parenting, on a plane in a different way. Like it's
right.
just about getting there. I
Right.
mean, my thought also like when we go to Japan, like I don't know what to expect with my son, to be honest. Like we're
Yeah.
talking about it and him being older, but I'm thinking like we may find certain foods that he likes and I may be like every day we may go there because I know that that's what's going to like get him through.
Yeah.
you know we are also staying at like a apartment style hotel with a kitchen, so if I find food at 7-Eleven that he likes that I just bring back, like um I think that it is about surviving and also make because that makes everyone else comfortable,
Right. Yeah.
like it's a trip. Like
Mhm.
just go with it. It's not going to be 100% perfect
Yeah.
and things are going to happen, but
Mhm.
it's a short period of time.
Right. Yeah. It's not the rest of their lives. So,
No. No. So, we've been talking a lot about like survival mode and pre-planning. What advice would you give other parents of kids that have some sensory sensitivities, when they're maybe taking their first international trip or they're headed to Disney World, Disneyland,
Mhm.
anything that you think would be important to share?
So I think number one, it's important to start small.
Mhm.
I feel like if you have never been on an airplane before, you don't need to book that flight to Japan tomorrow. You know, I would start small and, maybe do a staycation that's like 30 minutes from home and get
Yep.
used to that, or do a road trip or stay at grandma's for a week and see how that goes. And I feel like, just because you see all these people doing these big trips, it doesn't mean you need to do that right
Yeah.
away. And I feel like it's kind of these building blocks to be able to get there if that's what you hope to do one day. And it might take a little longer and you might have to wait until, you feel like you guys are ready, but I think that's okay. And I think
Yeah.
another piece of it is that practice makes progress even with travel. So just like any other skill, like if you're playing piano, you have to practice to improve. And so I feel
Yep.
like travel is also kind of a skill in some way, even for our kids and even for adults
Mhm.
too, who might not travel very often. And so it's not about like having the picture perfect trip, but it's kind of trying the hard things, trying the uncomfortable things, and realizing like I did it. It's
Yeah.
okay. Like we survived it, it's not as bad as I thought it was. And I think that's a big thing that I've been learning in terms of just parenting sensitive kids
Mhm.
is that like you can't avoid the hard stuff because the hard
Yeah.
stuff will feel harder the more you avoid it, and it kind of
Mhm.
grows bigger, and the anxiety around that thing gets bigger. And so it's the same with travel. I feel like if you keep kind of like putting it off or being like, no, I'm scared they're going to melt down. I'm scared that they're just going to scream on the plane the whole way. I'm scared of XYZ. Like, then it's going to like grow in your brain and
Yeah.
become like this bigger, impossible thing. And so just take that little step. It doesn't have to be a leap all the way across the world, but taking those little steps helps so much, and just practicing it and doing those little trips, it'll all add up, I feel like, in terms of getting used to sleeping elsewhere, to
Mhm.
maybe eating different foods than usual, or, you know, being around in more crowded places. Like, yeah, we all have our preferences for sure. Like I'm also an introvert, and I also don't really like crowded places, but I feel like with practice you figure out what works, you figure out how to cope better with the things
Yeah.
that feel hard. And so I think that's a big piece of it for parents who aren't sure if they can really travel yet with their families. And I think another thing for me was also adjusting like my definition of what fun is.
Yes.
I feel like for a lot of parents, even not on vacation, but even doing different outings or different traditions for holidays, like we think that certain things will be received as fun, but then our kids don't think it's fun, right? And
Yeah.
then for us as parents, that, you know, when you have that expectation of like, oh, they're going to love this, I'm so excited for them, and then if you don't get the reaction you were hoping for, then you get this like resentment and you get frustrated at your kids and all of that. And so I've been it's been a learning process for me too, that,
Mhm.
you know, I can't prescribe like this definition of fun for my kids or even for each respective child,
Yeah.
you know. And it's
Yeah.
going to look different, and that's okay. And I think it's a lot about like following their lead, like following the things that they do like and kind of lingering there, and not rushing to do the whole list of things that I made up to that I want to do,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I think that is a big piece as well.
Yeah. I mean, and everyone that I've talked to, everyone talks about like setting the expectation, you know, or kind of like resetting the
Right.
expectations.
Hmm.
Like it's just it's such a commonality in this thread that I hear from everyone, and setting the right expectation is so important because no one's let down at the end of the
Right.
day. You know,
Exactly.
I mean, everyone wants to come back from a vacation and say like, "Oh my gosh, that was so fun and I can't wait to go back." Instead of
Hmm.
like, we all had a miserable time and no one ever wants to go to Disneyland and no
Right.
one wants to go on a longer flight than 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, I'm so happy to meet you and
Yeah.
to connect this way. Where can people find you? Your blog, Instagram, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so my blog is momsmakeitmagical.com, and you can find me on Instagram with the same handle, Moms Make It Magical. I've also recently started a YouTube channel, which, you know, is still in its beginning process, but it's with the same handle, Moms Make It Magical. And I'd love to connect with anyone who, you know, needs more tips or support in terms of traveling with a highly sensitive child.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you again so much. And I can't wait to see all the good things that you have to come and more trips that you take with your kids.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how your Japan trip goes as well.
Yes. All right. Thanks.